When you hear the word Viking, what comes to mind? Filthy, bloodthirsty barbarians with horned helmets, wielding giant axes, burning everything in their path, and constantly drinking wine from skulls, right? I hate to disappoint you, but those famous horned helmets never existed in history. That image was nothing more than a simple theatrical costume designed in the 19th century for Richard Wagner's operas. Real Vikings weren't foolish enough to wear horns in battle. On a battlefield, a horn on your helmet is nothing but a deadly handle that guides your enemy's sword straight to your head. Moreover, these men weren't cavemen living in the mud like in the movies. English records from that era state that Vikings bathed regularly every Saturday, combed their hair, and wore clean clothes. In fact, because of this extreme cleanliness, local English women fell in love with them, while Christian men absolutely despised the situation. They were as brilliant strategists as they were raiders. When they marched onto the battlefield, they wore practical iron helmets and thick leather armor. But their true weapon wasn't their swords. It was the massive psychological terror they unleashed upon Europe. Emerging suddenly from the sea, the fog, and the darkness, these men paralyzed their enemies with fear before even drawing a blade. So, how did they build this fear? Just by attacking suddenly? No. It all started with their first blood-curdling raid on the Lindisfarne Monastery in 793. With the terrifying stories they left behind, stories that kept even kings awake at night. The most blood-chilling of those stories was an execution method considered the absolute peak of Viking brutality, the Blood Eagle. According to legends, in this method applied to their most hated enemies, the victim's ribs were severed from the spine with an axe, and the lungs were pulled out to form the shape of bloody wings. The victim was supposed to endure this agonizing pain without ever screaming. It was believed that if they screamed, they could not enter Valhalla. But did this horrific ritual actually happen? Modern historians believe this might have been a smear campaign by the Christian monks who wrote Viking history. The monks deliberately exaggerated the brutality to portray these pagan warriors as demons from hell in the eyes of the public. However, while prayers of "Lord, save us from the Northmen" echoed in churches, this exaggerated demonic portrayal caused the Christian world to miss a crucial detail. This army of demons didn't consist solely of giant men. If you were a woman in a Christian European country at that time, you had no rights. You lived in the shadow of men. Yet the dynamic of that terrifying Viking war machine devastating Europe was vastly different. In Scandinavian society, women could own land, engage in trade, and divorce their husbands instantly if they were unhappy in their marriage. Furthermore, they could fight in wars. For years, historians thought the Shield-Maidens we see in TV shows were just a mythological fantasy. That was until the 1880s, when a grave filled with massive weapons and sacrificed horses was discovered in the Swedish town of Birka. For over 100 years, everyone was certain this grave belonged to a high-ranking male commander. However, a DNA test in 2017 proved that this legendary commander was actually a woman. Men and women fought shoulder to shoulder and died shoulder to shoulder. But how did this isolated Scandinavian society from the edge of the world turn into a global power capable of challenging the entire known world with both its men and women? The secret lay not in their swords, but in the engineering brilliance that carried them across the oceans. To view them merely as blood-spilling warriors is a great injustice to history. Before becoming the nightmare of Europe, Vikings were flawless engineers. The technology that allowed them to open up to the world was their dragon-headed ships, which they called Drakkar. Unlike the clumsy ships of Europe, these longships drafted only about a meter underwater. This allowed them to brave ocean storms, as well as silently navigate shallow rivers right into the heart of Paris and London. So how did they find their way in the middle of the ocean in an age without compasses? The answer was in calcite crystals known as the Sunstone. Even in heavy fog and overcast weather, they used this stone to refract the polarized light of the sun, navigating with absolute precision. Thanks to these ships and their superior navigation skills, their horizons weren't limited to just raiding. They became the world's first global merchants. They carried the silver of Baghdad and the silk of Byzantium to the north. They traveled to Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, and became the personal bodyguards of the Byzantine emperor, known as the Varangian Guard. Even today, a 1,000-year-old Viking graffiti is carved into the marble of the Hagia Sophia. Moreover, they set foot in the Americas 500 years before Columbus. However, this immense global reach and trade network also meant they carried the very poison that would bring an end to the Viking Age. Exploring the world and conducting trade meant that Vikings had to mingle with other cultures, especially Christian Europe. Realizing that a great state could not be built on swords and plunder alone, Viking kings had to integrate into Europe's political and commercial network. Remaining a pagan kingdom meant being excluded from this new world order. Thus, leaders like King Harald Bluetooth of Denmark embraced Christianity to unite Scandinavia and gain legitimacy in Europe. The glorious legends of Valhalla were replaced by church bells. Those fierce men who made the world tremble weren't defeated in battle. They assimilated by changing, marrying Christian princesses, and serving as mercenaries for Christian kingdoms. They settled in northern France, becoming the Normans, and over time, those feared barbarians became the founders of modern European monarchies. As Thor's hammer slowly gave way to the cross, a magnificent era was conquered from within and came to an end. There were no horns on their helmets. As much as they were fierce warriors, they were also people who valued their women, brilliant merchants, and unmatched engineers. Today, we stripped away the bloodthirsty barbarian mask that history forced upon them. So, what do you think? Were the Vikings truly the demons that descended upon Europe's dark ages, or were they brilliant explorers far ahead of their time who changed the world? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey where we shed light on the hidden face of history, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next mystery.